Well, hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good wherever you are in the world. I hope you're having a wonderful time. I have internet gremlins again, so I'm hoping that we are going to have a fairly smooth show. But welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And of course, one of our favorite guests is Leo Zagami. Hello, Leo. Welcome back. How are you?
Just woken up. Here it's, of course, the morning time in California, where I'm talking from, and we're having very unusual weather in Southern California with a blizzard, the snow, even on San Diego, and here in Palm Springs, on the mountains all over. So it's a very interesting moment we are living after so many years of listening the usual. People talking about climate change and the fact that we will have all this heat, this world that it will be basically melting in front of our eyes. But here instead, we are actually quite cold at the moment. It's like maybe
the opposite, right?
Yes. We're not in the heat any longer. We are at 7 degrees Celsius, which is rather low for around here. So we're enjoying this unusual weather, and we are of course also celebrating, maybe not 1 year after the beginning of the military operation in Ukraine. That, of course, has changed the geopolitical theater scenario, however you want to call it, the geopolitical power struggle between the Sino-Russian New World Order, which I talked about, as you know, very much in volume 7, and, of course, America, which used to be heading the New World Order after the Second World War, and now it's seemingly in the hands of people that don't have a clue, but obviously they are internal enemies of our nation. So it's almost like we are pushing towards this World War III, and at the same time pushing towards an economy that, of course, is struggling because we are pouring billions and billions into this never-ending war. You have dedicated today the subject of today's show to Mafia, Freemasonry, the Vatican, and I must say there is a lot to say here also regards also to the war, because just a few days ago an investigative journalist in Italy made public the recordings, vocal recordings on WhatsApp of Matteo Messina Denaro, the godfather of the Sicilian Mafia, who was arrested earlier this year. And in one of his voice messages, he was talking about the war. He was talking about the fact that he actually supported Putin because he thought that the Americans were unjust in an unjust way going towards his own country, and they were placing missiles in his own territory. If that happened, of course, that would be a disaster for Putin to have NATO just literally at its doorstep. And so they already have many countries that have passed after the fall of the Soviet Union in the hands of NATO. Now, of course, we have this struggle in Ukraine, which though means much more. And regarding the Mafia, Cosa Nostra is not the only Mafia in Italy, and is actually today probably the one in more difficulty, though it still retains a lot of respect because, of course, they have this fierce image. The Italian mafias at the moment are the Camorra in Naples, which usually it's under the control of Cosa Nostra, because the heads of the Camorra Mafia in Naples get initiated in Cosa Nostra. And I talk about initiation because it's a real initiation that the people who join the Mafia do. It's an initiation in every sense of the term. And it was actually created, modeled by Freemasons in the very early stages of the Italian unification. Then we have the Calabrese Mafia, which is...
Would you mind? Sorry, I want to just interrupt you, if you don't mind. I want to just ask you a question about that. You were speaking about people becoming initiated into the Mafia.
Yes.
Now, how does that actually work in terms of to be initiated into the Mafia. I understand that the Mafias there are obviously different ones, but I would imagine that they would all be belonging to the Secret Brotherhood, one of the other as well, or the Freemasons, right? So it really, I think
we need to
yeah.
be a little bit compartmentalized to make the pyramid clear to everybody of power without mixing everything up. That's why I was actually ending saying the most important mafia, most relevant in the last 20 to 30 years has increasingly been the Calabrese mafia, which is known as 'Ndrangheta. Now, of course, all the heads are in Freemasonry, only the heads. There is actually even there an initiation ritual like in every mafia, and only the heads, usually back in the days when Licio Gelli decided to relaunch the Calabrese Mafia in the 1970s. For those who don't know who Licio Gelli was, he was the worship master of the Lodge P2. It was a period of great turmoil, also politically speaking, in south of Italy and in Calabria. Calabria is this region which is just in front of Sicily. On the other side, we have, of course, Sicily and Messina, the town which my grandfather and father came from, though my grandfather was also from the Aeolian Islands. The actual 'Ndrangheta was a mafia that wasn't really well structured. So in the 70s, they were helped by Freemasonry in being structured a little bit better. And initially, 33 of their clan heads were initiated into Freemasonry. And later on, though, it became a much more vast operation in which most 'Ndrangheta, Mafia, 'Ndrangheta, I repeat, it's the Calabrese Mafia. So for those who don't know what 'Ndrangheta is, just to make it clear. Then we have another mafia in Puglia, which is a little bit east of Calabria. That is the Sacra Corona Unita, the Sacred United Crown, and that is Pugliese Mafia. But it's always been not so, I mean, they exist, but they haven't been so powerful because they've always been constantly fought by the neighboring Calabrese Mafia, and of course Cosa Nostra, who has always had control over everything ultimately, but there has been, of course, some Masonic lodges that have provided a trade union between the Calabrese Mafia and the Sicilian Mafia. Those lodges prevalently are in Reggio Calabria, which is in Calabria, but also in Sicily, in Catania. These lodges that, of course, made possible for these mafia bosses from these different regions to come together. But ultimately, all these irregular or regular forms of Freemasonry, which, of course, have all these mafiosi, are controlled by organizations that are even more elitarian, like the one I used to belong to, which was the Monte Carlo Lodge of the P2. Once the P2 got dismantled because of a scandal that erupted prominently in all the news in the early 80s, well, at that point already the Monte Carlo Lodge became a feasible alternative because the Principality of Monaco is, of course, outside of Italian territory and couldn't be investigated. And so they were more free of keeping also all the names of the big bosses and all the people who are. And there was also a point of contact between the certain kind of Italian Freemasonry and France. France has historically been, and this is something I explain in my books, of course, a place where Masonry has been has a leading role since, of course, the French Revolution in the way society goes. France has, from the 1870s onwards, really led the world of Freemasonry astray in a bad direction, in a satanic direction, if we want. They first created a schism with the rest of worldwide Freemasonry, with the United Lodge of England, when they accepted people who didn't believe in God, and that led to the possibility of a lot of Russians like Trotsky, Lenin, to be initiated and start their own form of Masonry, which kind of kicked off in the early 20th century, and that was the Grand Orient of the Russian people, which Lenin headed up until the Russian Revolution. And then after the revolution in the 1920s, eventually Freemasonry was outlawed when it wasn't regarded useful any longer for the Soviet cause. However, the actual French form of Freemasonry, the Grand Orient, was also the first one to be present again once the Soviet Union fall. And so they kind of represented themselves, them and their allies, which is the Grand Lodge de France. In France, there is different Masonic obediences, a little bit like in Italy, though less, because Italy is really full of different Masonic families. The French one have an alliance between the Grand Lodge de France, the Grand Orient of France, and also the mixed female-male lodges under what is basically known as an organization known as CLIPSAS, which operates also in other countries in Europe with what is known as liberal Freemasonry, progressive Freemasonry. Grand Orient of France with people like, for example, Emmanuel Macron. He's typical example of the Grand Orient of France, just to give you an idea. The Grand Orient of France recently was also connected to the investigation when the mafia boss in Sicily was investigated, because finally, and I wrote about it also on leozagami.com for those who are interested, want to find the links of my books, want to find my latest articles, they can always go on leozagami.com. And there I wrote, right after the arrest, what no journalist wrote immediately. Later on, everything I wrote was confirmed. All the various lodges involved with the mafia boss that was protected for 30 years and was actually living in his hometown, was not hiding anywhere. And I mean, it wasn't such a big town. I mean, it's a little village where he was hiding for 30 years, and he's the boss of Cosa Nostra. And he was also traveling abroad. He was going to Dubai, he was going to South America, he was going around to England, always with the protection of Freemasonry. And not only regular Freemasonry like a lot of Masons think, but also regular Freemasonry, because in my article, I already evidenced the lodges of regular Freemasonry. Regular is, for those who don't know, those forms of Freemasonry who was recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England or recognized by most of the US Grand Lodges, just to give you an idea. Then you have irregular, which is also considered the Grand Orient of France and everything that it has to do with that kind of Freemasonry. However, aside from anything else, they found in the town of Castelvetrano, and basically where the boss was kind of controlling everything, they found the actual temple of the Grand Orient of France that was leading a lodge that, of course, being under the control of France, couldn't be controlled by the Italian authorities, because they didn't have the obligation of giving their names to the authorities. After the P2 scandal in Italy, a lot of things changed, and so the laws became much more stringent. In reality, you should communicate to the authorities every time you are coming together with a group of people for any kind of ritualistic or social purpose or political purpose. And that's something which I did myself when I decided 10 years ago. I moved my own order from Monte Carlo, because I was inside the Monte Carlo Lodge for a period of time, working with Ezio Giunchiglia, with all these people, because up until 2006, as you know, I was inside the so-called New World Order, inside the establishment of the Illuminati, which I then describe in my books. So what happens is that we have 10 years ago, my decision was to bring to the Italian scene a form of Freemasonry which was Christian again and could involve Freemasonry, so to convince Freemasons of their wrongdoings and turn them back to God. And it was a great idea. And on paper, it looked all great. We didn't really manage to we kind of were successful for a period of time. But of course, they were much too powerful for us to, though we were even invited in Sicily, and I went there. And I went to a Grand Lodge in front of all the Grand Masters of Sicily, and I was actually received in a very in a very good way, I must say. There wasn't anything. They tried to convince me that I was wrong on certain assertions about certain lodges because they didn't want me to deny, they didn't want me to expose them too much. And I didn't care. I said, sorry, but this is my job. You can't ask me to do that. However, what happened was that I was invited. There was February 2017 to the Concilium Maximum, which is the reunification of all the Grand Lodges and lodges that operate in between Sicily and also in Calabria. So I wasn't scared. I never been scared of mafiosi because I am an aristocrat. I am considered in Sicily Don Leo, Lion Zagami, a marquis and a prince. They don't touch me. It's not possible for them to touch me. The only thing they can give is a kiss my ring. That's it. It's a tradition. Freemasonry created the mafia. So for them, the structure behind it is still the one of the sacred Roman Empire. And they have a respect towards the aristocrats, the royals, that of course is intrinsic in what is Freemasonry. So for that reason, I wasn't whacked or I wasn't eliminated. Though, I mean, I went through some scary moments, of course, threats and things because of my exposure work. But having said that, when it comes to Matteo Messina Denaro, the boss that was just arrested, he said, going back to what I said at the beginning, he said some very clear things about the war. He said that basically Putin, for him, is in the right to do what he's doing. And he thinks that Zelensky is a complete crook. He said, I would like to help. He even said it openly. And there is a vocal recordings that have been broadcast on Italian TV. I will help with my money. That means the money of the mafia, the Ukrainian people, if they give up on this nonsense, and Zelensky is basically put aside. So Zelensky is definitely not very welcome by Cosa Nostra or the Godfather, who seem to be more in line with, of course, Vladimir Putin. Of course, that is it's also because in 1992 there was an alliance between the Russian mafia and the Sicilian and Calabrese mafia. The Calabrese mafia, 'ndrangheta, owns even 2% of Gazprom, the company, the big oil company of Russia. So you can understand that, I mean, there is very much a direct link there. And in the past, the representatives of the Russian mafia have been seen in lodges in Calabria and in Sicily, people that were close to Vladimir Putin. So I hope that you are seeing me, because it seems like we're having some technical issues here. You seem to have been frozen. Let's see if the people who are watching me can confirm that we are on. Hello? Let's see if we can maybe rework it. Hello? Yes, I can see you again. There was some kind of technical problem. I was trying to see if it was on my side, on your side, but it seems like maybe it was on your side.
It's on my side. So that's why, Leo, I want to just say I'm loving hearing you. I'm not questioning or interrupting much, because firstly, my internet is very bad, and I would probably sound croaky or whatever. But please carry on. I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing, and I know the viewers are too. So I will interrupt with a question from time to time.
Yes,
if all goes well.
Yeah, we would like to remind the viewers that South Africa is going through a turmoil, energetically speaking, of blackouts that are continuous. So that also makes it very difficult for all the connections, of course. So regarding what I was saying, the mafia and Freemasonry have always been in some way connected. I wrote about it extensively also in volume 2 of my Confessions. Mafia can be interpreted in various ways. Some people interpret it as Mazzini. Giuseppe Mazzini was one of the people who put together Italy. Giuseppe Mazzini, so it's like Mazzini autorizza furti, incendi, assassini, the initials. make it Mazzini authorizes burglaries, burglaries, fires, and assassinations, of course, because all of this was supposed to be in support of the unification of Italy. The unification of Italy, you have to understand, came together because of Freemasonry, mainly because of the support of English Freemasonry to Giuseppe Mazzini, to Giuseppe Garibaldi. They were Freemasons, so these people, Garibaldi and Mazzini, both Freemasons, though some people say Mazzini wasn't a Freemason, he was a Freemason. There is also confirmations from the archives of Italian Freemasonry. And Giuseppe Garibaldi went around, it was a little bit like a show. He went around with these 1,000 people dressed in red shirts, unifying Italy. Whoa, it's so romantic, you know. I think like with 1,000 people, this guy who arrived from fighting wars as mercenaries in South America, and of course being very much involved with Freemasonry, could suddenly reunify the whole of Italy. No, it was a show. It was a show organized very well by Freemasonry, especially in Sicily. When he arrived, everything was laid out for him. The battles were basically a farce, all of them, to put together Italy. And then he arrived basically towards the king. The king came from Piemonte, from the Savoia family, and he handled what he conquered, what he had put together. Of course, fighting also in the process the Vatican, which was also a state that was blocking the unification of Italy, with kind of a very big, two big regions free, almost all in the control of the Vatican, that suddenly was kind of shrunk to a little nothing, which they are now, which is a city within the city of Rome. They were controlling in reality the center of Italy. But at the same time, the Mafia is, like I said, a product of Freemasonry, as well as Freemasonry is a victim of the Mafia, because you create something that then once it's like the genie that comes out of the bottle. I mean, once it's out, it's out. So the attempts that were made to control these mafiosi in the end they were so difficult. Even after the war, the Second World War, there was this character called Bandito Giuliano. He was a bandit in Sicily, going on a horse, but he was feared, and in the end he was very respected, and so they eliminated him, of course, in the end, but they couldn't eliminate the Mafia. The Mafia helped America liberating Sicily, liberating Italy. This happened because of Lucky Luciano, and what happened there was simply also very Masonic, because it's like The Godfather Part 3. I think it's a film that everybody should watch to have a clear idea. You have Don Corleone, who is invested of Vatican knighthood. Don Corleone, who at one point arrives in Sicily, and you can see there is a figure at one point in one of the scenes, which is a prince. Now, that prince is based on Prince Alliata di Monreale, which was the guy who initiated me in 1993. Who was a politician, but was also a prince, and he was also one of the heads of Operation Gladio in Europe. We can say he was one of the most eminent figures. He came from one of the most antique families of the Sacred Roman Empire. He was a politician in the monarchic party with my grandfather. My grandfather was also, of course, involved. So I talk by personal experience. Now, I had to flee Italy because in 2019 I understood that the Calabrese Mafia was going after me, and that the Sicilian Mafia was not able in any way, or the people within Sicilian Freemasonry, to protect me any longer. It was an internal matter also, because I saw the corruption of the Italian government, which is literally controlled by what is now known as La Cosa Unica. What does it mean? It's not anymore Cosa Nostra. The new Mafia is called Cosa Unica, which means one thing. Cosa Nostra means my own thing, no? Cosa Nostra is our own thing. No, Cosa Unica is basically one thing. because it's the alliance between Cosa Nostra, 'Ndrangheta, Camorra, Sacra Corona Unita, all the Masonic branches that are linked to it, and all this is controlling the state. The problem with Italy is no longer that the Republic in some way is fighting the Mafia. The problem with Italy now is that the Mafia is the Republic, because the Italian president is the son of a uomo d'onore, of an initiated Cosa Nostra member. So it's the initiation you asked me before of a Cosa Nostra member is basically, you have to understand that the initiations of Freemasonry of anybody who is initiated in Freemasonry knows very well that there is certain words that are said to the apprentice, and they are like threats. You know, if you and even during the 3 degrees, all these salutation points that you have in the lodge, the first one being this, which means if you get it wrong, if you go against us, we cut your throat, we slit your throat. The second part of the initiation is this, when you are basically in the 2nd degree, because you are tearing your heart out, or they will tear it out for you. And so this is becoming symbolic now in Anglo-Saxon, regular Freemasonry, after the P2 scandal in the early 80s, the United Grand Lodge of England, and so, of course, also the Grand Lodge of South Africa, Australia, and all the associated lodges decided to make some specific changes to the ritual. So when you are initiated, you are said these things, but then they said, no, it's only symbolic. It's only, don't worry. You know, it's all symbolic. While instead, in Italy, in the lodges, it's not symbolic, it's real. If you get it wrong, they slit your throat. So this is a very different kind of Freemasonry. And the problem is that I argued recently with Freemason from, I think it was from a lodge here in Santa Monica, who was saying, well, but you are talking about irregular Mason. I said, no. Go and read my article against that talks about, he actually made this criticism after I published the article denouncing the connections and the protection that Freemasonry gave to Matteo Messina Denaro. It's not only the irregular lodges, the one associated to Grand Orient of France, or just 2 irregular branches. We have lodges that are connected to the Grand Orient of Italy, which is considered regular by the Grand Lodge of California, by all the other American Grand Lodges. Then there is lodges from the regular Grand Lodge of Italy, which are considered regular by South African Grand Lodge, by the English United Grand Lodge of England. So you are fooling yourself. He said, oh, but can I disagree? I said, no, these are facts. And in fact, the week after, the doctor of Matteo Messina Denaro, the boss, was arrested, and he's a member of the Grand Orient of Italy, recognized by the Grand Lodge of California. So these fools, instead of opening their mouth, criticizing me, they should read. They should study my books. They should understand that Freemasonry is not just a social club where you put a compass and a square at the beginning of your town in America and everything is great. These people have no idea what Freemasonry is in places like Italy. So I had to flee Italy in 2019 because, of course,
I want to ask you just on that point, why you mentioned earlier on that you were protected. You were hierarchy, so you were protected.
Yes. I was protected up to a certain extent, but now the Calabrese Mafia is way too powerful to even for any form of protection, because they. Why
were you on there? Why were you on there?
Sorry, I want to tell you how they take over Italy. They have the biggest port called Gioia Tauro, and that port brings all the cocaine in Europe. So that's how they became the more powerful. They have the cocaine business. That's it. They have the 2 cartels of Medellin. They have all the cocaine they want from South America, and they get it from a better price than any other dealer. So that's it. I'm fighting an impossible war if I'm fighting against a bunch of cocaine dealers. I don't have that kind of money to fight a war against cocaine dealers. I'm risking my own family. I'm risking the health of my family. For that reason, I have to flee Italy. it's not possible for me to, it was a very big disappointment with at the beginning of 2019. I went in front of a judge, Elena Secchi, in the court of Monza, and this judge is, of course, biased. I mean, she had already gone after the Northern League. She had actually recently, last year, she went after Berlusconi. She goes after people because she's a leftist in the hands of the 'Ndrangheta. And the first thing I saw when I arrived to the court, and my lawyer, we were out, I saw coming out of the courtroom, which wasn't open yet, the Grand Master who was suing me. And he was like all friendly with the judge. I said, okay, that's it. In fact, not only I lost a few months later, but during my testimony, I said to her, you know, because they accused me, the accusation, which is the content that you find in volume 1 of my confessions, by the way. You can also see in volume 1 the photos of the people, the Grand Master who accused me and everything. I was condemned for the content of this book, okay? They contested me the fact that as a journalist, I accused them of certain things, especially their mafia links, the Calabrese mafia links, and also the connection with the Vatican, the connection of this Masonic obedience called the Grande Oriente Italiano di Piazza del Gesù, the connections of the Sovereign Grand Commander that I denounce and expose in the book with the Camorra mafia in Naples. And the judge told me, you said that there is fringes of this connected with the Vatican. I said, listen, first of all, this subject should be discussed within a Masonic court, because in a Masonic court, I will win. And she went like, ah! She said, you can't put the Masonic court above the power of the court of Italy. I said, well, but if the court of Italy is actually in the hands of these people, then it's not a court of Italy. It's the court of the 'Ndrangheta. I'm being here judged by the 'Ndrangheta. Of course I will lose. So that was a big disappointment, because then they went directly to my lawyer, who was a Freemason from my own lodge previously, and they told him, why don't you leave ZAGAMI and join our lodge? They literally said that. But later on, because this court case went on, before I ultimately fled Italy in May 2019, and I was condemned in June, two weeks later. And I knew that will happen. So that's why, because with them condemning me, they would have taken my passport, and that was it. I was isolated in Italy with my family, blackmailed, and possibly killed or arrested. So what she said, the judge, was that basically I was doing my job as a journalist, and but I should have, even if things are true in Italy, well, you can say certain things. And I was like, why? Why? Is this like, what kind of... So the crazy thing is that at one point, a couple of months later in court, after coming out of court, the Grand Master said, I will forgive Leo if he bends down in front of me and the Calabrese Masons and kiss my ring. Well, that really made me crazy. I was at that point, I was really angry. I was like, I told my lawyer, tell him to fuck himself. Sorry if but it was obviously something that I couldn't accept. And for that reason, I was like on my way out, and I secretly made the plan to leave Italy permanently, and later, like I'm doing now, change my nationality, because I no longer believe the Republic of Italy is an honest republic, is a corrupted mafia institution that should be brought down. Because the problem with Italy is that the present constitution was done by mafiosi. It wasn't in 1946, after the war, the mafia helped, of course, America. The mafia put their own people in political places of power. There was a party called the Christian Democrats, which for 50 years then became the party that will win the elections, thanks to the mafia. The opposite, the kind of fake opposition of this whole thing was, of course, the Communist Party that was instead being financed by the Soviet Union. But they were, the communists themselves, of course, they were at times linked very much to Freemasonry, and they were most of the times communist only on paper, because then inside the lodge they would be saying, no, I'm a real fascist. Well, so there was like some kind of fake opposition also going on. However, what happened was that in the early 90s, the so-called First Republic fall, because there was a big scandal, because the Soviet Union fall. And with the Soviet Union fall the whole Italian Republic. That is the scandal that brought the investigation of an Italian politician called Bettino Craxi. It brought the investigation of an Italian prime minister like Giulio Andreotti, who was actually the real head of the P2 and of a secret group called the Ring, and he was actually also the legitimate son of a pope. Now, Giulio Andreotti was considered like I had the opportunity to interact with him. He was very graceful, actually, to me, a very graceful person. You have to understand, these people, the more they're powerful, the more they are very graceful, because they know that just a little touch, they can do just a little thing like this, and the guy is dead. So, they're very graceful. So in the early 90s, the Italian, first of all, there was the fall of the Soviet Union. With the fall of the Soviet Union, there was the fall of Gladio, because Gladio will no longer get the money. Gladio was also financing the P2. The P2 of Licio Gelli was financing another Masonic institution. Like I said, in the early 80s, the P2 had to change kind of name and stuff. But once it arrived in Monte Carlo, it became clear that all the heads of the various lodges and grand lodges, even the new ones in Sicily, were all controlled by Licio Gelli. Licio Gelli went down to Sicily, initiated in Trapani Matteo Messina Denaro, the present godfather. Licio Gelli was the one who also agreed to have 33 representatives of the Calabrese Mafia initially, and then later on opened up even more. And those Mafia representatives, then I met in the Monte Carlo Lodge. That's how I met these Calabrese mafiosi, who Grandmaster of whatever Freemason branch. I didn't meet them at the Mickey Mouse Club. I met them in the Monte Carlo Lodge. So when I went in front of the judge, I said that. I said, listen, I didn't meet these people down at the bar. I meet them in this place, in this address, which actually used to be the headquarters of the Christian Democrat Party at the time in Livorno, where they were also doing Masonic meetings. And I said, this is how I met them. This is how I was introduced to them. And then later on, I exposed them because they got me in some serious problems, of course. Once I understood also who was behind them, because initially I was brought to them by a lieutenant colonel of the Guardia di Finanza, an Italian, which is the finance police, like the Italian IRS. And I thought, they might be respectable people, why not? But then after, of course, I realized that was complete nonsense. So I later on denounced them in my book that came out in 2012. Volume 1 came out for the first time. This book had many editions in many different languages. The first time it came out, it was in Japan. When it came out in Japan, nothing happened really, apart from the Vatican calling me up, and the Secret Service of the Vatican. It was General Martinelli with this guy called Antonio Leonardo Montuoro. They said, we would like to make you an offer. It was a little bit like an offer you can't resist kind of thing, It was like, if you don't publish this book in Italian, we will open for you a bank account and you will become Grand Master of Disorder. And I was like, no, thank you. And so it was like for a period of time, the Vatican really tried. They invited me to the Vatican, to these masses, these Knights Templars. This can be all yours. You can do this, you can do that. Because they had some I was like, yes. I didn't want to immediately say no because I wanted to gather more information to put on my book. So I was just like collecting information. Then in February 2012, I brought out the book, and that was like, boom! Suddenly it became a bestseller in Italy. It was 5 editions of this book. It sold between 5 to 10,000 copies, this book in Italy. So for this kind of book is very successful, especially in Italy where nobody reads. So it was in every bookshop in Italy. And I was on TV talking about it. I was called, it was a big thing. But at one point, because initially, they thought they could keep me under control in a way, they said, okay, even Berlusconi forgives you. You only said he makes a bit of sexual magic on the side, this and that, whatever. So it was like, Berlusconi would like to offer you also a position in his political party. And I went, I participated to the elections. And I lost, because of course I lost. They were all so corrupt. I couldn't believe my eyes what I was seeing when I was involved in that kind of scenario. But however, the book denounced these people, and they became really angry with me, the Calabrese Mafia, not the Sicilian Mafia. And in the early 2013, when I was actually just in the election period, they started moving this lawsuit against me. Lawsuit at the beginning seemed that the lawsuit had, it wasn't really so substantial to make me worry. I mean, I had a lawyer initially, then I changed lawyer, but both lawyers were kind of adamant in saying that they will not be able to condemn me. However, the court case dragged on, as it usually is in Italy. And it arrived all the way to 2019. So it started in 2013. In that period of time, I was involved, as I said, first in this political thing that didn't work out. Then later on in the social unrest of the Pitchfork Revolution, always in Italy, that blocked Italy for a couple of months with the help of the unions. We managed to block Italy, and we were trying to... right at the beginning of 2014, when Ukraine was living a coup d'etat that started the war, I was proposing to leave altogether NATO, to leave Europe, and to basically close down to this nonsense, because this will bring us to where we are now. But of course, I organized this manifestation, this protest with thousands and thousands of people, and became very dangerous later on for me. They broke into my house, they broke my door. My wife was literally shocked. The police arrived, pointed guns at me, they broke me away and locked me up for 3 weeks. And the thing is that when I went to be locked up, because first the police came and picked me up. They broke the door like I was, I don't know, like I was a terrorist. I mean, I said, sorry, I'm in my pajamas. I was like, so I at that point, was brought to a mental asylum. It wasn't like a prison. I was like, are you insane? I've been just accused of espionage in Norway. Can you at least bring me to a prison, not to a mental asylum where you're going to inject me with all this bullshit? No, we think that you are not well. What? I was like, what? So they started injecting me with stuff, and it became really risky for my health because they were poisoning me. So I put together a team of lawyers, two of them from Sicily, one of them from Perugia, and one of them was a Freemason from the Regular Lodge of Italy, so I could a little. But in front of him, and this is something that I discussed in volume 8 of my confessions, I even showed the photo of the professor. He, without any sense of shame, said this was a Calabrese professor from Calabria, okay? He said, I work for the Tavistock Institute in England. I was, what? I was shocked. He said it in front of my lawyer, so it was like, I turned around and said, wow, this is great for my next book. I was like, because I mean, this is like, you have basically the testimony. If they said it only to me, I couldn't go and say to anybody, oh no, Leo ZAGAMI is making it up. No, ask my lawyer, which is, I also provide the name and source here in my book. So I said, the Tavistock Institute wants me. Okay. So what are they going to do to me? For 2 weeks, every morning, they will play Bella Ciao. Have you ever heard Bella Ciao? It's an Italian communist song. And of course, it's a communist, so very communist. It's their hymn. And they will play it every single morning. I have a recording of it.
That's insane.
Like torture. And so it was really like an insane kind of situation. And plus, at one point, my team of lawyers managed to break a deal. They got me out of this place. I, of course, stopped taking every possible finger that they wanted me to take. But they wanted to force me every 15 days to take some lithium injection. So it would castrate my head and my mind and will basically transform me in a zombie. So at that point, I had to go. I still had some connections, of course, and I called the Dr. Antonio Vento, criminologist, famous Italian psychiatrist, one of the most famous Italian psychiatrists, and I said, you have to give me a hand. He was recommended by also another guy in my lodge, and I said, can you help me? He said, don't worry, come to me and I will be able to help you. Of course, I gave him a little bit of money. I said, you know, I will give you some money because I think if you're taking this, it's not an easy one. And when I arrived to his office, I remember, in this remote part of Rome, in the Quartiere Africa, in some villa, and then inside I opened, there was like all these old arazzi, these things. I mean, it was really gorgeous place. And he used to be a very influential figure in Italy, not only in the medical establishment, even in the political. In the 80s, he had been connected with the Craxi, the P2 and everything. So I said to him, I arrived there and he was on the phone. I said, so I wait. He puts down the phone. He says, Leo, Matteo Renzi and the people who are now going to be in government, they don't want you anywhere near a square, anywhere near politics. If you continue, they're going to lock you up for good and they're going to kill you. So I'm going to take the responsibility to stop them from, because they were actually at that point capable of forcing me into taking lithium without my consent, which will have ruined me forever. So he said, I'm going to take the responsibility of everything, saying that I give you all the meds so they get off your back. You can go now to America, because I was about to leave for America at that point. I wanted to leave already back then. Even if, unfortunately, after I had to come back in 2014, I came to America, I found a book deal, because in the meantime, they had censored all my books, taken them off the shelves. It was a complete act of censorship, which of course was showing how scared they was. The Vatican was scared, but also the Freemasons. The Vatican were scared, of course. Pope Francis was trying in some way to keep me from exposing more things. He actually invited me. I was in the Vatican at one point in December 2013, because also he invited all the representatives of the Pitchfork insurrection, revolution, however you want to call it. And I remember Christmas of 2013, guested, and I was having dinner with the Japanese ambassador and my Japanese co-writer Ali Yamanuchi, who is also a famous actor. He acted in Wolverine the Immortal. He does this immortal Japanese that after the nuclear bomb becomes immortal. But he's an actor, but he's also a translator, and he also co-wrote a book with me for the Japanese market. And we were at the headquarters of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre after I went to meet the Pope on December 25th, 2013. Now, all this happened in a situation which became increasingly very difficult for me. But I continued, and I wanted to, thanks to my own form of Freemasonry, create maybe a way to dialogue with them diplomatically. That's why I went on with my Masonic structure within my order, the Ordo Illuminatorum Universalis. And in 2017, I was invited to to Sicily, mainly because I was also the president of Italians for Trump, and Trump had won the elections, and I had organized, outside of America, I was the only organization, people like Steve Bannon and many others talked about us. We were in every newspaper. If you go and Google ZAGAMI, Italians for Trump, you still find Italian newspapers with the Huffington Post, everybody talking about it. I organized on the day of his oath, he took the oath, the White House. I had organized an event in front of the American Embassy, a very nice event in an art gallery, and then we rented a palace in front of the Italian Parliament, and we did a reception in the evening. We had sponsors, of course, to afford doing something like that, and it was a great event which I did with Antonio Maria Rinaldi, which is now EU representative, EU deputy, however you want to call it, in the EU Parliament for the Northern League, and with the other co-founders of Italians for Trump, Gianmario Ferramonti, who is also co-founder of the Italian Northern League Party, and basically it was a very successful thing because I started this collaboration with Donald Trump, let's say his entourage, in 2015 after Alex Jones came to visit me in Rome. So this was great. And of course, because I was, now Trump was in power, the Italian Masonry was starting to become worried, and they invited me in Sicily for the Concilium Maximus. So I arrived there with the backing of the President of the United States. This wasn't a little thing, it was a big thing. And I arrived there and in Catania, and I remember still I have some photos of the event. There was this Concilium Maximum. At the time, the president of this Concilium Maximum was a guy called Corrado Labisi, who will be later on arrested for being linked to Cosa Nostra later on. But at that time, he was, he actually is a guy who is not really as bad as they say. I can confirm that, though, because in fact, he was immediately cited for another president in this organization when they saw that he wanted to actually clear up the mafia from these institutions, these Masonic lodges. It was almost an impossible task because, like I said, it's endemic in Sicily. Everybody is just a mafiosi. You can't just change the way they are. I think it comes from the fact that Sicily was for maybe 3 centuries a Muslim country. It comes, so it has also very much an Arab influence in its culture. And that, they say often, is the reason why the mafia has been so successful. The mafia in itself, back in the days, was connected to the aristocracy through a secret society known as the Beati Paoli. 100 years ago, the Beati Paoli were like the ones, they were cape, like the KKK, more or less. They wear these capes, and they meet only in underground locations. So in this really secretive underground locations under Palermo and under various cities in Sicily. They still exist to some extent. Some of them still exist, the Beati Paoli. The Beati Paoli was a way for the aristocrats to not get involved, put the cape on, go and meet underground with all these commoners, mafiosi, crooks, all kinds of people, and just give them the orders, but of course with the cape on. So you will not know it's the prince, you will not know it's the duke, you will not know it's the marquis, just getting the orders out. And from the Beati Paoli, later on, we got to what is now Cosa Nostra. More and more, Cosa Nostra became, though, involved with power, and with power, of course, became involved also with Freemasonry. During the course of the 19th century, there was this transformation more and more. And that's it, basically. The problem also with the mafia is that they are very much linked with the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. They are one with the Catholic Church.
I was about I was actually about to comment on that because the Vatican, the Freemasons, the Mafia, everything just seems like it's one big happy family in that, you know. So I'm interested in what you were saying earlier, is that in Italy, everyone is kind of like a mafiosa.
No,
So
well,
it's not.
I would say it's Sicily or in Calabria or in Naples,
Okay.
south of Italy. From Rome on top, the mafia in itself is not endemic to the society. Actually, society has other problems from the center going upwards, because then you have Florence, Bologna, and Florence is actually very Masonic. Those are actually Masonic, not mafiosi, just Masonic. They don't need to be mafiosi, because there they can control everything simply with Freemasonry and with certain satanic societies, especially in places like Florence, where the archives of the city hold some of the most ancient black magical grimoires. That's why you had the Monster of Florence, the sacrifices of so many young couples. And there is some very bad human sacrifice that has went on. I mean, Satanism and Freemasonry, of course. Then you have the mafia, the 'Ndrangheta, the Cosa Nostra. They established themselves in a different way in the north, more like white collar mafia, more like proper doctors, lawyers. You know, they wanted to expand in a way into legitimacy. That's why the typical mafiosi will always send his sons and daughters to become lawyers and doctors. And nowadays, in fact, the mafia boss, Matteo Messina Denaro, is defending himself thanks to his niece, who is a lawyer. And this is providing also the possibility for him to impart orders, because he's in a 41 bis, which is basically an isolation they created for the mafia bosses, a local 41 bis, which means complete isolation from the rest of the world. But because there is this trick that he has devised, no, let's make my niece a lawyer, so then I can, you know, she can come to visit me, I can give them the orders, and we can live happily ever after, because her niece is also the daughter of a big mafiosi in Palermo. They come from a big mafiosi family. The sister of Matteo Messina Denaro married with one of the most mafiosi families in Palermo. So you see how it works. When the guy came to me, that professor, and said, I work for the Tavistock Institute, that guy was a professor. He has 2 degrees. He works even for the Vatican. You know, he has also that link, which I discovered later. He didn't tell me that initially, but I discovered that later, that he's a representative of basically it's called the Episcopal Conference Medical whatever organization. So he was also working for the Vatican, not only for the Tavistock Institute. So the cupola we have here, the cupola of St. Peter's, okay? It's called the cupola. Cupola because it's this shape like this. Now, when you talk about the head of the mafia, you say the cupola mafiosa. Ultimately, the mafia is controlled by them, because all the mafia the money made was keep on recycling it through the Vatican Bank. So people like Matteo Messina Denaro will just hang out the Vatican, dressed up as a monk or as a priest, and everybody was fine with it. And this was actually very interesting, because I remember the day before his arrest that made the news worldwide. I said in a popular podcast here in America, quite frankly, I said, well, Matteo Messina Denaro is going around the Vatican dressed up as a priest, as a monk. He doesn't have any problem at the moment, I said. But we all knew for a few months that he was sick. He simply gave himself up because he's sick, because he has a cancer at the last stage. He's about to die. He couldn't get any more cures. He had to steal the name of somebody called Andrea Bonafede. So he stole the name of somebody else who voluntarily gave the name for him to use at the hospital. He was arrested in front of the hospital when he was arrested in Palermo.
Wow.
So he made a deal with the government. I will give myself up at my own conditions. In fact, when the government arrived and arrested him and went through all his houses, bunkers and stuff, They didn't find anything relevant, only a bunch of watches, a collection of nice sneakers, a collection of clothes, Louis Vuitton, because he was very much into fashion. He liked the ladies, so he had all kinds of things for the ladies and stuff. You know, he was a different kind of mafia boss for what we have encountered 30 years ago when we started to see the arrest of mafia bosses like Totò Riina and later on Provenzano. These were people who actually, when you see them, they look just like peasants coming out of a, you know, just digging the land. They were really simply looking people. This guy was wearing a $10,000 nice coat when he was arrested. Everything was all design, all nice. Himself, they didn't even put the handcuffs on him. They put the umbrella in front of him because it was raining, so just so to not make him wet, no? When he was going to the car, they open like he was the president of the United States come inside the car. Oh. They didn't lay a hand on him. The police, all dressed up with their special forces gear, they didn't lay a hand on him because anybody will die. Their families will die. Their friends of the families will die. Everybody will die. That is how the mafia works. And that's how they regain their power. But my denouncing for years their connection with Freemasonry was the problem, because in 2017, I think, so 16, I made a conference in the city of Tivoli, where I had my lodge in the Scuderia Estensi, with the representative of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, Cavalier Fortunato Luciano Sciandro, which is a famous Templar historian, the most famous one in Italy. And we said, Matteo Messina Denaro is protected by these lodges of Freemasonry. That's how it is. And nobody's doing anything. And he's the most searched and wanted man in the world, but he's protected by these people, and you're not doing anything. And and everybody was like, oh, well, you're ZAGAMI, ha, ha, ha. Fortunato Luciano Sciandro was a credible character. So he was actually calling me up after the arresting me and said, you remember what we said in that conference? Now everybody will be saying that, we said it first. I said, well, yeah, we said it first, but did anything change? No, because in 2019, before I left, 2018 actually, I started to receive threats from Cosa Nostra in Subiaco also. So not only from the Calabrese Mafia, some elements in Cosa Nostra were denouncing the fact that I exposed one of their members in one of their lodges, which was basically, what happened was this. I had has created a Masonic obedience, like I told you, to bring back Christianity into Freemasonry, to try to bring also my own values in Freemasonry and try to convince people to give up on this diabolical plan. And they had infiltrated one of my lodges, the Carvon Hund in Florence, with a member of Cosa Nostra. And as soon as I saw that, I said, that's it. I'm going to put you, because you are by law, you are required to do certain things after the P2 scandals. I told you earlier, there is certain laws. So I said, I don't want this guy in. If you let him in, you are out. All of you are out. And that's what they did in the beginning of 2017. That's what they did. So there was an internal war even within the Sicilian structure. And I remember, though, the people from Matteo Messina Denaro's lodges that were basically in Trapani and in Castelvetrano, they were there at the Concilium Maximum. I remember still like it is today. They called me up and said, come, there is some people I want you to meet, said the president of the Concilium. I went, and we were in the hall of an hotel, which was owned by him. So, it wasn't like an hotel. But we were just in the hall. I sit down, and there were these four gentlemen, and said, we are from the Loggia Scontrino, the Temple Scontrino. I said, oh, shit. These people now, are they going to kill me? Are they going to whack me? Because I had exposed them. I had told everybody that this was actually the place which initiated Matteo Messina Denaro. Licio Gelli came for that. I actually exposed the fact that they were linked, I have it in my books, also to Sergio Mattarella, which is the present president of Italy. He was initiated there too. So I was like, God, these people are that's not a good thing. So I let them talk, because, what are you going to do? You let them talk. Plus, they they were all doctors, head of the police. They were not just normal people, you know. They were like, so I let them talk, and they were like, Leo, we follow your work, say good things, but you haven't really understood the meaning of our work, the lodge that we have, our temple is not like you say. You should change the way you present us, maybe. And I said, yeah, sure. Sure. No worries. No worries, you know. I remember I was there with my own bodyguard, who was a guy, and I was like, yeah, don't worry. It's all okay. It's all fine. It's all dandy. And I just tried to go through this whole thing, just limiting the damage. I just want to go back on the airplane after 2 or 3 days. I think I stayed there 3 days and just get out of it.
I have to say I'm laughing because the way you imitate him is exactly the way they sound in the movies.
it was like that, and I mean, I remember this guy. I was sitting down in the divan, and the guy came towards me. You have not really understand the concept, the real nature of our. But what you want to understand, man? What you want to understand? What the hell do you want to understand? These people are all a bunch of criminals. So I mean, of course, I just went on and said, okay, the situation here in Sicily is. Plus, you know, we went. I remember that day because we were a lot of people for this reunion. There was a representative from every lodge in Sicily, so it was like maybe 100 people down in this Grand Lodge. I remember when we went out to smoke cigarettes, and I was like joking with them. I said, I'm sure that now we have at least the Italian secret police, the Italian secret service, and some other organization that can get some nice clear pics of us while we smoke this beautiful cigarette here. I was, you know, because like, you know, I mean, of course we were monitored. Everything was monitored. I mean, it's like, you know, you have, I mean, that is, you are in Catania, Sicily. You are not somewhere else. You're right there, you know. So I was Sicily is like a triangle. It's called, in fact, so the triangle you have, you know, you have on one side Palermo, then on the other side down you have Trapani is down, then Catania is right on the other side. So they had come all the way from Trapani to Catania for this meeting, and some of them had come specifically to meet me, and they were actually, like I said, very respectful, but mostly because they know my grandfather. They used to know my grandfather, who died in 1973, but was considered a very important figure. So, and then they know also that from my grandmother's side in Sicily, I have a title that is transmitted by the female side in the Regno delle Due Sicilie, which is of Marquis and Prince. So there was a lot of respect, I must say. On that, I can't say that the mafiosi don't have respect. They have a lot of respect. But of course, you know, I'm not your traditional guy that would just bow down. And I think they were very impressed by the fact that the president of the Concilium had not only invited me, he had invited me, had paid for every single meal, he had guested me in the most fancy room in the hotel. He had treated me like a star. So I can't say that I was treated badly. But of course, the interesting thing was then I go and pick up the plane. I had to leave the meeting because my plane was actually coinciding with the last meeting. And so I said, listen, I'm so very sorry, very, very sorry, of course, that I have to leave, but I have a plane to take. And so I went to take the plane. I go on the plane, and coincidence wants that next to me, there is the worshipful master of a lodge, regular lodge of the Grand Orient of Italy. Now, the meeting was between all irregular lodges. Suddenly I'm on the plane, and next to me is this. Now, what is the coincidence that, you know, you have a little bit, he gives me his card. He says, wow, I know, ZAGAMI. I know your work, your thing. Let's talk. So he wanted to know everything that was going on in the regular lodges, you know? I said, well, we had a great meeting. I must say, it's always fun. And so, you know, I put it like this. And we went on until Rome. It takes maybe 3/4 of an hour, the flight. But this demonstrated that the Grand Orient was also, Italy was following very closely and wanted to very much know what was going on before everybody else. So I think that in the end, nowadays, the last mafia boss has been caught, but I think that we still will have for decades, unfortunately, the influence of the mafia in Italy, because now they no longer have to necessarily go around shooting people or doing, they can simply decide the future of Italy in these lodges between all these people who are now lawyers, architects, engineers, and they are all basically people that in society they're very respected. So
yeah,
that is a big problem for me. I will only go back to Italy as an American. I will never go back to Italy as an Italian. I don't believe Italy as a republic, because going back to what I said about Italy, 1946, 2 of June of 1946, that's when Italy had to make a poll, and the poll was between monarchy and republic. Okay. Yeah. Now, I believe there is only one republic in the world, and that's America. The rest of the republics are a farce, and they shouldn't be republics. And then maybe people who read Volume 7 also know from the last chapter that I also believe that this is a republic with an expiry date, because in God we trust, and in God we trust means also when the Messiah comes, is the kingdom of God. No communists will be allowed in the kingdom. Remember that. Plus, the only way we will be able to front the communist New World Order, the socialist communist New World Order, will be the installment of proper monarchies. If you think that democracies will be able to fight what we are getting from China and Russia, well, you are eluding yourself. Because every 4 years they can buy out everybody. At every election they can corrupt everybody. Anybody that comes from a modest background and arrives into a seat of power will be easily corruptible. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Unfortunately. Absolutely. Okay. So try to corrupt, I don't know, a monarch who is there. They managed, sadly, to corrupt, from what I heard, even Prince Charles when he was a prince. I don't think he will be able to be corrupted now he's a king, because that will not be good for him. But corrupting a monarch is definitely a much more difficult option. And it goes back into the Illuminati history. The history of the Illuminati in 1776 was born by their decision of wanting to abolish all monarchies and religions. There is a reason why they said abolish all monarchies and religions. If you abolish all monarchies and religions, then Satan can take over the show. Yeah. And unfortunately, they have pretty much conquered and managed this, sadly. So I hope that I gave you an explanation about that is coherent.
Yes. I appreciate that. And I know that we're kind of out of time here, but I have a lot of questions, but I will leave them until our next show, which I hope will be not in the not too distant future, but I'll be in touch with you about that. Thank you, Leo. It's been very, very interesting. I've really enjoyed listening all about that. As I said, I've got tons of questions. About
if you have a couple of questions more, so that you want to do.
More, I was sort of like it was more like stuff leading off from earlier stuff you were speaking about. But it's fun. It's more about sort of looking into the different families and stuff like that as well. But I would love us to do
families. When you intend families, what do you intend? Mafia families, monarchic, like aristocratic family. What do you intend as families?
Well, it's exactly from all three, like the mafiosa families there, you know, the kind of like the bloodlines I'm sort of looking at, wanting to look at as well. How does that work with the Italians? But I think that really is a different show, because I think there's quite a lot in terms of that.
I mean, when it comes down to the bloodlines, like we demonstrated today, that bloodlines count even within the mafia, of course, and that there is very much a link also with the old monarchic tradition. In fact, the Savoy family still to this day has an important knighthood order, which at times was bestowed also on mafiosi and was linked. I mean, the Savoy representatives who were actually incapacitated from re-entering Italy for a number of years. They actually were present in the Monte Carlo Lodge, and they were, of course, interacting also with the P2 and the former Italian king gave Licio Gelli the title of count. So there is also that link, which is very clear, as well as the link to the black aristocracy, black aristocracy is all those aristocratic families that are linked to the Vatican in one way or another, serve the Vatican. And for that reason, they also have very close links with the Vatican Bank, with the Vatican power structure. Some of these families have provided during the course of centuries various popes. And so definitely there is a lot of connections. So when it comes to bloodlines, then the aristocrats as well as the royal families have a lot. Obviously, they have been corrupted. That's the big problem with monarchy. The Illuminati instituted a specific plan, which I talk very much in detail about in volume 7 of my Confessions, in which they said, either we convince the kings to adopt our ideology, our way of life, what are our values, otherwise we will overthrow them. So the monarchies that survived were definitely not the Tsar of Russia, eliminated brutally. It was not the Kaiser of Germany. It was not many other monarchies. We started to see after the arrival of the Illuminati the birth of constitutional monarchies. Constitutional monarchies is the first step to basically make a monarchy just a pariah, something that is not worth anything, because the monarchy of Sweden or Norway, they are just faces that go around saying hello, hello, but they don't have any power in their hands. The only monarchy which stayed with some form of power, real power, is of course the English monarchy, because they also made a direct deal with the Illuminati. And that is why in the last few days came to me the information, which I want to give as a scoop to all your viewers, that the United Grand Lodge of England is once again thinking of recognizing the Grand Orient of Italy. Now, for those who don't know, in 1993, because of the P2 scandal, because of what happened after, there was a schism in Italian Freemasonry, and the English took away the recognition of the main Masonic body, and they created their own structure. It was the regular Grand Lodge of Italy with Giuliano Di Bernardo. 10 years later, Giuliano Di Bernardo founded the Academy of the Illuminati and walked out of Freemasonry because he wanted to control more elite structures, amongst them Dignity, which became very influential in Ukraine. So all these things are all interconnected, as you can imagine, and I think that people will benefit from, of course, reading Volume 8, because Volume 8 is a book which depicts how we should shield ourselves from the world of entertainment, which is used to promote their values, their insanity, their plan. Volume 7, instead, is still a very relevant book because it's also a manual, a survival manual for actually implementing your own survival in what is dramatically becoming obvious to everyone. And this is the apocalypse. This is the end times. Now, you might not believe, you might not be a believer, but you can't say that these are not the end times, because they are manifesting in front of your eyes. And it's like... becoming obvious that we will not be able to save all of our society, but it's also becoming obvious that we can create micro societies independent from all that. Of course, this can happen only in territories where you have the possibility of defending yourself with weapons, and that is the United States of America, which still gives us the First and Second Amendment. In places where weapons have been taken from the population, like Australia, that's it. End of story. Places like Europe, where the guns have been taken out of circulation after the Second World War, increasingly making it difficult for people, because they were making it difficult for people, but at the same time, the Mafia, Gladio, Operation Gladio, the state behind operation that was supposed to protect from communists, laid immense quantity of weapons at the disposals of all the thugs that worked for the New World Order. So guns and defending yourself are an essential part of the resistance that will have to be implemented between now and 2030. If you think that this is not going to happen, well, check out what's going to happen later in 2023, because this is going to be the year in which probably we're going to have a first nuclear detonation, first nuclear bomb, first atomic bomb since Hiroshima and Nagasaki to hit the civilian population. And at the same time, we will have, of course, a theater of war, which is expanding more and more from Ukraine to Moldavia through Transnistria. And of course, it's going to expand later on also to Georgia. And it's going to expand inevitably to the rest of Europe, which will become a battle zone. So Europe is going to become a battle zone, like World War I and II. And the rest of the world is not going to have an easy life, especially once this ambiguous role of the Chinese is kind of like coming, because let's not forget, we talked about Gioia Tauro, the 'Ndrangheta. The main allies in Gioia Tauro of the 'Ndrangheta are the Chinese Mafia, the Chinese triads, and of course the Chinese Secret Service. So in all the drug wars of today, you have the hand of China, and not only in fentanyl but also in cocaine. So it's all interconnected, and I think that the only possibility that we have today is to prepare for the inevitability of a societal collapse, and to prepare in any way possible that we. I don't want to be negative and say we don't stand a chance, because we know that some of us will survive, and some of us will refuse the modality that is proposed to us. The modality that we propose to us in the next 10 years is embracing transhumanism, the artificial intelligence, cyber Satan, which I talked very much about in volume 6.66. And the inevitability of all this means that smart cities, so all the big cities that are now in the hands mostly of leftists, are taken over by the machine, that you will be required to enter the cities, vaccines, you will be monitored constantly. Cities will not be a place where you want to go if you want to be a free man. So abandon the cities, but also remember that just like I think that in South Africa, you have already an example of how society can really crumble, and how you need to protect your own security. Because in South Africa, if you don't protect your own security, you end up dead very, very easily if you are a white person these days, unfortunately.
Not only white, everyone, quite frankly.
Everyone. Yeah. Of course, everyone.
It's such a war zone, with poverty and everything as well. So naturally, that's the first thing that people resort to is violence, taken from those that they think have more than them.
Yeah, so, and that's why you need to have at least a bunch of like-minded people that are able to protect themselves and protect their interests and protect their way of life, abandoning the possibility of interacting even in a few years from now with the rest of society, because once they're microchipped, they're far gone. You cannot interact with a microchipped individual. Remember that. In 2023, I'm saying that. In 10 years from now, I will not be able to say that, because we will be censored completely, and everybody will be willingly lining up to get microchipped. So thank you so much for having me on, Chantelle, and God bless you all who are following us today. I think that we went through a lot. We basically also depicted a scenario which is not the best scenario in the world, but we have to be realistic. We cannot be irrealistic, especially when it comes down to the mafia. This is ultimately, even in a world stage where we are living with powerful, rich foundations and rich actors in this whole theater of war and stuff, we are definitely living a reality in which they are simply gangs. Zelensky is a gangster. Putin is a gangster, just as Zelensky. But Joe Biden is a gangster. These people are all gangsters.
They all are. It's all part of the same thing. That's what I'm saying. And I really think we've been duped. We've been duped into believing these guys are the good guys and they're going to save our world. They're not. You know, I've been interviewing a lady who was a Russian lady who's a ex-child soldier trained by the Russians to be a double agent. I mean, it's insane, the stories that she's been telling about the whole Russian programming and how they program. It's so different to the whole American system. You know, the Russian is all about meta. It's all about this whole meta world. And that's what, I mean, it gave me such an insight into...
I have though, something to say here, because of course I've been in Russia many times. I worked with the Russian government, Ministry of Culture back in the days when I was a record producer and a DJ. And so I know Russia. I was able even to meet Vladimir Putin. I know Russia like I know my pockets. So I can tell you one thing, that what is saving Russia is the return of their belief system in the Orthodox faith. They are no longer communists. They have rejected communism. When it comes down to anything like you are talking about, people have been, of course, indoctrinated from a very early age to do certain things and all that. This happens in America, happens in China, happens in Russia. Anything that has been made by one of these three countries is repeated by the other, experiments, everything. So of all kinds. The next phase is, of course, also transhumanistic. So, of course, Chinese soldiers with bionic arts running around, or interconnection. Of course, the computer brain interface is also a very important moment in which you are not any longer interacting with a human being, but you're actually interacting with artificial intelligence. So you don't even need in the future to prepare people from an early age. Just put them a chip, a thing here, and that's it. And now they can also telepathically telepathically control robots. So that is going to be part of the warfare scenario. The future that we are about to see is unfortunate for all the future generations, but also we will see that Russia, that has regained a virile system based on masculinity, based on traditional values, female is a female, a man is a man, like Putin has said in his latest speech. Well, they are actually the ones who are probably going to be more in luck to win this war, because if the first bombs that start triggered, you're going to have a lot of problems in the West, especially with all these millennials and their fake values. People who don't have anymore the values of the real values. They don't know even if they are a man, a woman, they are gender fluid, they are thinking about rubbish. They are driven by what they call the smart world. So everything is on their smartphone. Guys, in one day, that's going to all go. And then it's going to be man, woman. And that is a very important thing, because the talk that Vladimir Putin gave for the anniversary, let's say, even if it was done a little bit in advance, symbolizes all that. However, the problem with Putin is his alliance with China. China has never really had Christianity. They only had the Jesuits, very influential within Chinese culture. But the Chinese have also their own form of Freemasonry, have also their own Mafia, one of the most powerful in the world. You don't want to mess with Chinese Mafia. I remember one guy in Rome, a Moroccan, went to steal in a Chinese bank. He was found 2 days later, hanging upside down, his blood drained, in a way that not even the most vicious Italian mafiosi would have done. And it was all very clean, tranquil, nobody saw anything, and nobody would ever know who did it. And that was the Chinese Mafia for you. And the initiation that the Chinese Mafia does within what is known as the Hongman, the Chinese form of Freemasonry, it's a very simple one. While instead in Italy, you read an oath, you burn the image of a saint, and you say certain prayers, and so. The Chinese are much more effective. They pick you up, they bring you downstairs. There's a bunch of skull and bones from real cadavers, dead bodies. They burn a little bit of incense and they say, if you want to go back upstairs, take the oath. Otherwise, you join them. So this is
simple as that.
Eh?
Simple as that.
Very simple. So it's like I think that we have to understand that the level of viciousness in Asia, when it comes down to Chinese, Japanese, Korean mafia, man, they can be really very, but they have a lot of respect for the Sicilian mafia, because the Sicilian mafia has demonstrated they are just as bad as all the other, probably even worse at times. But they have created that, I guess, also thanks to Hollywood, this myth. Hollywood, because Italian Americans were present here, managed to become, but also here in America, we have an order, the Order of the Sons of Italy. And it's actually a paramasonic order founded by a Freemason with lodges all over the United States. And, they are the white-collar mafia, basically. I know that they would say that, oh, no, that's not true. We are all respectable people like Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, in fact, you are all respectable people like Nancy Pelosi and the husband who was sitting next to Bono of U2 during the speech of Joe Biden for the State of the Union. What was that all about? Well, if you want to know more about that, read, of course, Volume 8 of my Confessions. Take care, Chantelle, and speak to you soon for the next chat.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this lovely Friday with Leo ZAGAMI on Aquarius Rising Africa. Very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Leo. I'll definitely be listening to this interview again. And we'll be having you back soon with some more amazing information. Do you want to just actually, no, Morné has put the book link in the comments section. So any of you guys interested in Leo's book, again, amazing, very interesting.
I would say books, if they didn't get also Volume 7, get Volume 7. If you didn't get Volume 6.66, get Volume 6.66. But even starting from Volume 1, I mean, there is a series of books that, of course, shape the information warfare that I've been trying to do during the last few years to make people more aware of the reality of this new world order rather than the speculations. I mean, giving the names, the times, the addresses. This is really of help. When it comes to general speculation, the Illuminati did it. Oh, yeah, but who? Where?
My power's gone off, so I really have to go. I was hoping to end before the power switched off. Okay, guys, take good care, and we'll catch you soon.